an animal fighting venture, even attending an animal fighting venture, even attending a cockfight, or knowingly cause an individual who has not attained the age of 16 to attend an animal fighting venture. 3, knowingly buy, sell, possess, train, transport, deliver, or receive any animal for the purposes of having the animal participate in an animal fighting venture. So if you're buying chickens from the mainland, could be a problem. Knowingly using the U.S. Postal Service or any written wire, radio, television, or other form of communications in or use a facility of interstate commerce to advertise an animal for use in an animal fighting venture, or to advertise a knife, gaff, or other sharp instrument designed to be attached to the leg of a bird for use in an animal fighting venture, or to promote or in any other manner further an animal fighting venture except as performed outside the United States. Knowingly sell, buy, transport, or deliver in interstate or foreign commerce a knife, a gaff, or any other sharp instrument designed or intended to be attached to the leg of a bird for use in an animal fighting venture. It's a pretty comprehensive list of stuff that will become illegal on December 20. Penalties for each violation allows for violate any one of those. Penalties for each violation follows for a maximum of 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine for perpetrators, except for an adult attending an animal fighting venture. Penalties for adult attending are a year in prison and a $500 fine. So after the 20th, if you can find a cockfight and you go and someone rats you out to get the $250, as you were, the $2,500 reward, it might wind up costing you $5,000 in a year in jail for your ticket to the cockfight. Pretty expensive entertainment. Federal agencies and officers have a duty to enforce our laws against the barbaric practices of cockfighting and dogfighting, said Wayne Pacell of the Animal Wellness Foundation. But their good works depend on the cooperation and alertness of citizens. We ask people who know about illegal animal fighting activities to help us stop these forms of cruelty. So, a very interesting issue. Let's see a show of hands out there in our international radio listening audience. How many people out there in our international radio listening audience think that cruelty to animals is okay? It's just kind of like, well, so what? They're just animals. Is it okay? I don't see any hands going up out there at all. How many people out there in our international radio listening audience thinks that dog fighting is okay? You know, where Fido and Max are thrown into a ring and fight to the death. Not seeing a whole lot of hands going up there either. So we've had a lot of virtue signaling here since the Farm Bill passed, making cockfighting illegal on the 20th of December, setting up all those federal crimes and the penalties. And we had Sabina Flores Paris, along with a passel of co-sponsors, sponsor Bill 185. And there's all kinds of really nice virtue signaling in this bill. Now, let me read a few of them. Okay. On September 27, a pet dog named Pugo was shot and killed in a carport of a Jigo home. His case galvanized our community to rally against animal abuse. With our island's well-established concern and advocacy for the welfare of animals, our laws must now be updated. In other words, we've got to bring those laws up to date. The legislature finds that it is intended the government of Guam to properly protect and promote the well-being and safety of animals. As such, this act reinforces existing standards for animal welfare and adds the best practices to ban previously unaddressed forms of violence. Now, here's a hot one, such as bestiality. You know what bestiality means, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir.
It means having sex with an animal. I wouldn't have expected you to know that.
No, sir.
Certainly, yeah. But the Sabina Paris is cracking down on bestiality. A new distinction between animal abuse and animal neglect is included to allow for more nuanced charges. And increased charges are added for animal abusers with a history of family and sexual violence. The Act further establishes pre-conviction processes regarding rights and procedures for seizing an animal. Reporting requirements for certain types of professionals are added, but veterinarians and animal control are excluded to avoid deterring the public from seeking care for injured animals. The PAWS Act also includes post-conviction procedures for requiring community service, education, registration for felony convictions, and court-ordered mental health evaluation and treatment. So if you are convicted of animal fighting, you may find yourself being ordered for a mental health evaluation and mental health treatment. The implication here is that people who engage in animal fighting have a screw loose upstairs. Exemptions have been maintained for self-defense, hunting of game animals, public health emergencies, animals properly raised and managed for food. We do, after all, eat animals, don't we, Real Joe Cruz?
We do, sir.
Yeah, I hear the guys on the morning show, especially as we get close to the weekend, start talking about grill marks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, maybe that's a code that was invented in anticipation of this particular statute passing, but grill marks is a code word for barbecuing meat over an open fire, which isn't illegal yet. Notice I said yet. Exemptions here. So exemptions have been maintained for self-defense, hunting, good animal hunts, etc., and cockfighting. Okay, well, I got somebody calling in here. Maybe it's a God's an Arrow. No, it's Gabe. Afternoon, Gabe.
Well, good evening. Good evening. Very interesting conversation. This sounds like a socialistic government control state they're requesting. That, okay, we're mandating mental treatment for you now. This is a law.
Well, only if you're an animal fighter. If you're an animal fighter.
Well, no, but I mean, more and more laws. Let's get more and more control, more and more government, more and more regulation. But again, where's that line for animal fighter? I mean, you said it a minute ago, cockfighting.
Well, I'm coming to that. You know, Sabina Paris really. You know, this is a. Let's see. This is a bill that is 34 pages long. I mean, she's really coming down hard on animal abuse, including bestiality. She just says no tolerance whatsoever for animal abuse, but cockfighting's okay.
Well, then I'm okay with it. You hadn't gotten to that, Bob, yet? Shit, I'm sorry.
Shucks, I'm sorry, Gabe.
All right, but anyway, I'm a right-winger. Less government.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you calling in, Gabe. It's been a while since I've heard the dulcet tones of your voice, so try to make it a habit.
You have the other end though. You have the ear here, just the voice once in a while. Thanks,
Okay.
Bob.
Well, thanks for calling, Gabe.
I'll keep listening. Keep going.
Thank you. Yeah, well, Gabe makes a good point here. So if you have been convicted of animal fighting, you might find yourself under scrutiny of someone who deals with mental malfunction. So, if you have some aggressive urges, don't get involved with animal fighting. Just go out and punch somebody in the nose, because that way I think you can probably avoid the court-ordered mental evaluation. We haven't come to that yet, as Gabe points out. Gabe sees a kind of a Brave New World or 1984 dimension here, the saying that if people don't act the way we want them to, then we've got to send them to a shrink and examine the inside of their head. So back to this bill here. So Sabina Paris is really virtuous on this. She just has no time whatsoever for animal fighting. And lots of penalties, and it's a 34-page long bill. I've got a news story here from the Post. Yeah, well, let me just hang on to this for a second here. So here we have a situation where a passel of senators have signed on to a bill that is extremely stringent, and it's dealing with animal fighting and bestiality. I mean, it's really a be kind to animals type of bill, which I think is wonderful. We should all, there's no reason not to be kind to animals. If an animal can't be controlled, then there are ways of dealing with it. So we're just 100%. We're really true blue on that, except for one thing: cockfighting. Now, I've been to a cockfight. In fact, I've been to a couple of cockfights, and not being able to go again doesn't trouble me that much. But it's pretty brutal if you've ever been to one. If you see these cocks, you see the two gods and arrows holding the cocks up to one another to get them properly angered, and they go after one another with the knives tied to their ankles, and usually a fight to the death. It's pretty brutal. So what makes cockfighting different from all of the other animal fighting that Senator Paris is so upset about? I shouldn't say she's upset about it, that Senator Paris finds necessary to deal with in no uncertain terms by amending Guam law to make it really tough on those who would fight animals for sport or recreation or fun or for whatever reason. But then she says it doesn't apply to cockfighting. So how do we thread that needle? How do we deal with this in such a manner that we could exempt cockfighting and make everything else punished very severely by the law? Do we get out? Remember, I've told you about my lawyer's toolkit. A lawyer has a toolkit. He's got a pair of dung-colored glasses that he could use to look down the road and see every bad thing that could possibly happen. And he's got a little pocket calculator upon which he can figure out how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. And he's got a knife that's so sharp that he can split hairs with it. So how do we split the hairs here and say animal fighting is always bad, should be severely punished? People who are convicted ought to have mental health evaluations, but then say, but cockfighting's okay. I'm going to break from that for a second and see what our Carl can add to this discussion. What can you tell me, our Carl?
Hey, Bob. Yeah, maybe you can tell me, if I'm off track, but I think issues like this, like cockfighting, abortion, marijuana, and many other issues that aren't specifically given to the federal government in the Constitution should have gone to the states. I think this is just crazy. I don't care about cockfighting. I do like animals. I've rescued some of them. When I see a suffering animal, especially a small one, I tend to try and rescue them and try and help them out. But I don't like this blanket legislating from the bench kind of issue. That's one reason.
Of course, it's not from the bench, Carl. It's the U.S. Congress.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, still, I still don't like the fact that they've taken it on themselves to legislate this issue for all 50 states and the.
No, this is just for the territories, Carl.
Why did they leave out the states?
Well, and that's something that I want to get into here. The national government has to have some sort of a jurisdictional peg to hang its laws on. And the one that's used most often is interstate commerce. So if Congress wants to regulate interstate commerce in gamecocks or knives or things like that, fine. But as you say, Congress doesn't have the ability or shouldn't have the ability to tell the states what cruelty to animal means. So they couldn't do that and be in accord with the Constitution in the states. In the territories, you don't need any particular nexus because in the territories, Article 4, Section 3, which I just happen to have in front of me here, says the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory of the United States. So if Congress thinks that a rule on cockfighting is needful, Congress has plenary power to do that, even though it couldn't do it in the states.
Well, you're telling me something new. I'd assumed all this time that it included the states, and I find that kind of hypocritical that they're not, doing it for all 50 states. I guess they're legally not.
Well, according to news reports, all 50 states had outlawed cockfighting, and this was the impetus for the Congress to say, well, we've done it in all the states, now we got to do it in the territories.
Yeah, I just think that all these issues similar to that should go to the states. The result of abortion not going to the states is that we've terminated over 62 million unborn infants, and that's just a tragedy.
Yeah, well, of course we don't bring that same soft-heartedness to in utero children, do we? We there's no be kind to unborn children law. Animals, yeah, but not unborn kids. It's okay to abort them. And then back to animals, Carl. So I think what you're saying here, scraping the paint and varnish off it, is that it should be up to each individual state or territory if they want to be cruel to animals.
Yeah, I believe so. I like animals. I've got pets, and I like.
Yeah, but let's not fall into that trap here where we start out with a result and then work backwards, and then justify our fondness for the result as we work backwards. So I mean, you come right down to it. Whether or not people in a state want to be cruel to animals ought to be a matter of state law, and the national government should keep its nose out of it, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
So when we come back to that hard question here, it really shouldn't be that hard, but does Guam should Guam separate from the rest of the United States and be an independent country? Things like this article I'm reading now is raw meat for the separatists, because they're going to say, here they are telling us what we can and can't do on our own island. We've been cockfighting for 500 years, et cetera. And now they think they can just come in and tell us. And the reason for that is because we're not independent. If we were independent, that wouldn't happen. And of course, for once, they'd have a point, because whether or not we should outlaw cruelty to animals, it should be a matter of state law. And under my approach to our situation as an unincorporated territory, we should try to get the Congress to think in terms of us in the same way that they would think in terms of a state. You can't just come along and pass a law because you think it would be a good idea. You have to have the same constitutional nexus that you'd have to pass a law that would be applicable to the states. And of course, the other side of it is that Congress doesn't even give the states a whole lot of respect. You've heard me say more than once that we don't have a federal government anymore. We have a national government where the national government grabs as much power as it can and sees the 50 other entities out there as mere administrative districts. You've heard me go off on that one before, right?
Yes, yeah. I would like to see the federal government.
You mean the national government?
Oh, yeah, the national government return to be more of a federal model and take care of the big issues and leave things not specifically assigned to them. Leave that to us and to the states, and just leave us alone for the details, the minutia.
Article 1, Section 8 tells Congress what it has the power to do. And of course, we not only have the Congress making law, we've got the upperest house, the United States Supreme Court, which is the upperest house of our three-house legislature, because they can void any of the laws that the lower house puts into place, finding things like rights to privacy and other abominations in the penumbra of the Bill of Rights.
Can you answer one last question before I hang up? How much of our present situation falls to our responsibility, and how much is the federal government's responsibility? I mean, obviously we have tried before the Constitution, and it didn't work out well, but we could have been more aggressive, we could have been more proactive, and eventually gotten that done. I mean, how much is due to our passiveness, and how much is due to the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C.?
How much is due to the fact that the people who claim to be really into the whole question of political status are working in the colonizers' government? In other words, are quislings. Melvin Bora is working for the government of Guam, working for a government established by what he so quickly labels as the colonizer. So I think that lack of aggressiveness in pursuit is because too many people are willing to stand aside and say, well, the government's doing that. They're not doing it very well, but the government's doing it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Well, thanks, Bob, for your thoughts. I appreciate it. And thanks for allowing me to chime in.
Okay, Carl. Thanks for calling.
All right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways of splitting this hair. I guess you could start out by saying, well, a chicken really isn't an animal. Okay, we got the 7th inning stretch coming up here.
Hafa Day, Tritons. This is Chelsea St. president of the USG Alumni Association. I made some of the best memories during my time as a Triton. Because of this, I have committed to giving back to the G is for Giving campaign, which will help student scholarships, programs, and activities. And I encourage you all to do the same. To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu by December 31st or call 735-2957.
Viva UOG!
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Would you like to sleep better? I've discovered a simple way most people can do that. And is there a risk associated with early retirement? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, those topics are up for grabs.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
hard hit ball, center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, Chicago, Illinois. Time for the 7th inning stretch. A nice day for baseball. Maybe not such a nice day for cockfighting, since this organization here called, what's the name of it? Animal Wellness Foundation is now looking for snitches, and they'll pay a snitch $2,500 for a tip leading to the arrest or to the conviction of any animal fighter. So, Ken, what can you tell me about animal fighting?
Absolutely nothing.
Well, I'm glad you got here just in time.
Yeah, I've been waiting for my throat to calm down because I've been, redoing my presentation, trying to streamline it so that it's easier on the throat. But I just wanted to call and remind everybody that on Sunday at 2 o'clock at Just Pirates Cove, we're going to have a year-end review on the administration and the legislature. I was going to say pointing out the highlights, but there aren't very many. A lot of lowlights, and what we can do to take control, because it's our government. And when we as citizens don't act, don't get involved, then we're leaving politicians to decide what they think is best for us, starting with who donated to their campaign. And that's what happens when we as citizens let them steer the boat. So we need to get more involved. And on Sunday we'll show specific examples of what they're doing and what that's costing you, because everything costs you. Nothing the government does costs the government any money, because all the money the government has comes from us through the form either in taxes or in fees. So anytime they do something, like, for example, a lot of people don't give much thought to resolutions, but I do. I costed it out. I think it's about $400 every time they have a resolution. By the time, you get the paper and the printing and the framing and the mounting and the time spent getting all the signatures and the presentation ceremony, right?
Yeah.
You realize that we're almost at 300 resolutions? So that's like $240,000.
Yeah.
Well, not 24,000, pardon me, $24,000. But, $24,000 could go a long way to doing something that this community really needs. So that's why it's so important for us to get involved. And it's the simplest things that we can do that really magnify our effect. You know the power of a FOIA. I know the power of a FOIA, but anybody can use a FOIA. And as governments start getting more of those things, they start getting a little more careful about their dotting their I's and crossing their T's. Sitting in on these hearings, or just watching the hearings now, because now all the senators are watching how many viewers are watching the hearings. And you can tell when there's a lot of people watching, because all of a sudden the senators start making very grandiose speeches about, for the benefit of the voters, for the benefit of the taxpayers, for the benefit of the people, And that's just playing for the camera. But that's good, because it shows that they're paying attention.
So what time on Sunday, Ken?
2 o'clock in the afternoon, Sunday afternoon, until about 5.
Okay. What's the format?
The format is I'm going to be doing a presentation, but there'll be Q&A all through the format. So anybody wants to raise any questions, feel free.
Okay,
and
so you'll have a microphone and be
yeah.
Okay. Will you be
sound set up?
Will you be doing it inside that teepee-shaped building at Pirates Cove?
Yeah, we'll be inside the A-frame pavilion, and so for those of you who want to come down there and have lunch, I'm sure Jeff would appreciate that.
Well, as a matter of fact, on Sunday, I did go to Pirates Cove and have lunch.
Oh,
Yeah.
I saw your picture.
Yeah.
Sent me the picture. Of course, I didn't see it till like 4 o'clock the next morning. Oh, yeah, it was. This is the first time in my adult life I've missed a flu shot, and boy, am I paying for it.
Okay, well, good luck on Sunday, Ken.
Announcement: get your flu shots too.
Already, now, it's so easy when you're in the States. You can go to Walmart or Walgreens, or it's just so easy to get a flu shot there.
Well, that's true. I mean, here, I used to get mine at Kmart. I just forgot. So, yes, get back to the show.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for calling, Ken. Sounds like Ken has the same co-host that I had for the first couple weeks I was back on the air. Sometimes I think my cough got more microphone time than I did. Remember that, Real Joe Cruz?
I do.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to this cockfight ban here. So there are a lot of different ways to slice this one up. You know, a chicken is definitely an animal, and if you read Sabina Paris's bill, chickens are definitely covered, and she said she exempts cockfighting, but only in a properly sponsored cockfight. So if you are doing your own cockfight in your own backyard, you're not really covered. And then with respect to this reward and this organization, I suspect that if they saw Sabina Paris's bill, they'd say, we've got a smoking gun right here. Here's someone that is aiding, abetting, encouraging people to break federal law. But, it wouldn't be the first time, would it? We have a legislature that has enacted cannabis legislation in the face of the fact that it's a Schedule I narcotic on the Fed's narcotic schedule. And then, of course, we get to the C word. And that is that I suspect there are already people, there's the smart money over there and his lazy boy, the guy who has all the answers, saying, I don't know what the feds are doing, cockfighting's part of the culture. It's part of the culture. I learned cockfighting from my grandfather. I ain't gonna stop. Let him come and get me. And that's something that needs to be commented upon too. Is the big C word? Is that the beginning and the end of every argument? Is it all that is necessary is to say, well, yeah, maybe that's against the law, but it's part of the culture. Therefore, no harm, no foul. We're going to do it anyhow. And of course, we had our local legislature pass a resolution and say they're not going to enforce this cockfighting ban. They don't have any role of enforcing it anyhow. So there we have the classic case of virtue signaling. Whether they like cockfighting or don't like cockfighting has nothing to do with it. They want to get out there in front and show everybody that they are sensitive to the feds interfering with our culture. So let's see, you've opened up the Tom line. Very good. Hi, Tom.
Good afternoon, Judge. I've found this fascinating, this conversation that you're having about the pause bill. And what I really wanted to do, if you'll allow me, is to just sort of play devil's advocate a little bit. I also don't understand the cockfighting exclusion at all. But what I wanted to ask you about was this business that Carl brought up about the states or territories having the right to determine whether, what sort of cruelty, if any or all, that they would tolerate. And I just wondered, would you feel that the Congress would have a role in determining cruelty to humans, whether that was okay or not?
I don't think so. unless you can tie it to one of the enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8.
So that would seem to open up sort of a Pandora's box. If Congress has to stay out of that, and if the states are going to be able to determine what constitutes cruelty to humans, I'm not saying that I disagree. I'm just trying to really understand. Then that would really open up an awful lot. I mean, conceivably, you could reinstate slavery or almost anything, and the Congress would have to stay out of it. Would that be the second order effect of that?
Not really. We do have other protections in the Bill of Rights. Article, the Eighth Amendment, excessive bills shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. So that means you can't punish people who have been convicted of crimes. And then we have a broad range of protections under the 14th Amendment. The 13th abolished slavery, etc. But when we're talking cruelty, let's take some examples and maybe kind of define terms a little bit. Up until John Dillinger and all of the people like him in the 30s, there basically was very little federal crimes on the books. There weren't even any federal penitentiaries because there were so few federal crimes. So when that crime wave broke out in the 30s, Congress got involved, but through the interstate commerce power, the power to regulate interstate commerce. So if we decided, as an example, that tattooing the words Robert Klitzkie on the forearm of a child would be a form of cruelty to humans. Talk about starting out with a result. I mean, nobody would argue with that. Of course it's cruel. Saddle somebody with that for the rest of his life. But Congress, as I read the Constitution, Congress would not be able to criminalize the tattooing of those two words on a person's arm. Wouldn't be able to do it out of whole cloth. They could prohibit transmitting in interstate commerce the devices necessary to do it, the pattern, the ink, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Congress doesn't have the power to make local criminal law. And that's why conservatives get so upset about, the runaway Supreme Court finding a right of privacy in the penumbra of the Bill of Rights and taking that to abortion on demand and Herman marrying Henry.
Yes, sir. That all makes sense. And what I wanted to get to was the basis. I've always been a little troubled by the basis, the difference in rights of humans and rights of animals. That is, I've never been really comfortable that what is that basis? Is it based on chromosome number? Is it based on intelligence? Is it based on the ability to speak? What really is that basis that makes it different? And I know, I'm sure you're aware that these are being explored sometimes in courts, where I heard that an orangutan was recently given basically civil rights. And it sounds funny. And
Democrats.
About what is the basis for denying rights, for example, to an orangutan? Maybe the orangutan doesn't need voting rights, but does he or she or they not have the same right to be free of pain, for example, that a human would have? And if not, why not? What is that basis?
I think it comes down to politics, Tom. I think if Democrats could be convinced that orangutans would all vote Democrat, you'd see a lot of laws protecting orangutans.
It'd be a tidal wave.
Yeah,
maybe so.
Well, this is how I see it, Tom. And my okay, I'm going to have to take a short break, but I'll wind up the program with this. This is a really good question, Tom, as are all of your comments. And by the way, I'm glad to hear that you're finally overcoming your cough.
Yes, I'm much better. Thank you, Judge. I owe it to clean living.
Okay. Well, hang on until after we go to the post at Churchill Downs, and we'll wind this up, okay?
Yes, sir.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami?
My big hot pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
This Christmas, GTA announces the magic of giving. We've custom designed a line of 9 pop socket accessories that honor 3 organizations whose main goal is to help children. They are the Harvest House, Regalu Foundation, and Sanctuary Incorporated. For every customized pop socket sold in our stores, all of the proceeds will be donated to these great charities. This Christmas, come into GTA and be a part of the magic of giving. GTA, we start with you.
So here we are, Tom. We just heard the call to the post at Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. We're heading down the home stretch, so that means we got about 5 minutes here to wrap up this super interesting conversation. Your question, why is it that, it's beyond argument that cruelty to humans is wrong, but we have to stop and think, why is it that we even have to deal with cruelty to animals? And I've got, as usual, a complicated answer. I think it all is grounded on the word sentience. Humans are sentient beings. That is, they're knowing, intelligent. They have a mental capacity to understand their own existence. Animals don't.
Okay, Judge, you're going to have to prove that point, though, to me. You're going to have to prove somehow that animals are not self-aware, that they're not sentient, that they, there was a philosopher who said that they're trapped in the immediate, that they have no concept of past and future, and I think that has been very well refuted. So I'm not sure how you could be confident that they're not sentient. I'm not sure what your basis for that confidence would be.
Okay, well, perhaps my own sentience. And as part of that sentience is a feeling of empathy, so that humans have an empathetic relationship with animals, and it's against human nature to be cruel to animals. Usually, not always. Now, I like animals too, and I have a feeling that dogs are pretty empathetic themselves sometimes.
Yes, sir, I think so.
And then here's another way of looking at it. You could go to the Bible, and the Bible says that God created man in his own image. And I can't give you chapter and verse, but said that the other things on the earth are put here for man's own use. So I would take that and turn it into a kind of a utilitarian philosophy that man has the ability to make use of the animal kingdom for his own use, and if he is empathetic or perhaps adheres to the tenets of a religion, he's not going to be cruel to animals. And then there's one other thing I'd like to throw in here while we're on the subject. Have you ever heard of PETA? PETA?
Oh, have I ever?
Yeah, I imagine you probably had to deal with them.
Devoted to dealing with nothing but PETA. When I was at Letterman Army Institute of Research, that was basically my job, was bouncing off those guys.
Yeah. So they are animal rights to a fare thee well. And as I see their approach, they advance all these rights to say that any distinction between men and animals based on the fact that men have a, quote, soul is wrong, because there's no such thing as a soul. And if there's no such thing as a soul, then everything should be treated. So I see this as a back door to taking a neo-Marxist idea public.
I would go a different way with it. I would say not that no one has a soul, but what is the basis for a dog not having a soul? I would go that way rather than say that none of us have it. I would say perhaps all of us.
Yeah, but see, that doesn't advance the neo-Marxist ideology. And neo-Marxist ideology is to do away with any concepts of Christianity or a supreme being or any kind of a teleological approach to life. If the neo-Marxist approach is we've got to deal with oppression, and the only way to deal with oppression is to throw off all of these old restrictions that have saddled us.
We're out of time, Judge.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you called, Tom, and good luck with that cough, okay?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Judge. Bye now.